Hey, must be Thursday. Family Matters with the one and only Kevin Petersen. How are you?
I'm good. Looking forward to my lunch with Jay Staples.
What are you having for lunch?
Blackened.
I'm eating on today, so this is unfair.
Well, that's life. Blackened turkey.
Hey,
Reuben.
I thought therapists were supposed to be nice.
I'm not your therapist.
So how are you, sir? How's life? What's going on outside of the heat and humidity in Florida?
That would be about all. little hurricane action, bunch of tornadoes, a bunch of flooding. It's been a August in Florida. Let's just put it that way. Mm-hmm.
You chose to live there, so.
And you know what? We'll talk again in February when you're getting ice storms.
It's late January always, so excuse me, not February. So.
All right.
Wow. Well, anyway, any burning desires, anything coming up, anything you want to hit on, talk about, scratch the surface on?
Nah, man. Let's see what we got. See what people want to talk about. Life's good. I'm happy. It's good to spend time with you. I look forward to this every week. Anxious to hear what everybody has to say.
Well, good. Couple of questions, and they're pretty good. They're really good questions. It's what I say. When I say good questions, I deal with it on almost every family call.
Yeah.
So you have. It sounds like there's kind of multiple daughters, so they keep saying we or something. But so anyway, so let's just say typical situation: loved one goes to treatment. In this case, it's two older sisters or something. Family wants to know, Kevin, I've been worried to death. I'm always worried about little Johnny if he's going to overdose or something. Now he's in treatment now, and so they're wanting to know, what do I do with all this worry? What do I do with all this time, energy? Obviously I'm realizing that I put far too much time, energy, thought into saving Johnny or getting treatment. But now that he's in treatment, what do I do now, Kevin?
God, I know you got to focus all that anxious, nervous energy and anxiety on somebody else. I'm sure there's another child that you can, go after, or a spouse, or a friend that would love to have all that codependent attention. So, great question, and the answer is very straightforward. Just as your loved one is in treatment and learning to recover from their addiction, so must you learn to recover from your addiction to them. So how do we do that? Well, we do that in a couple of different methodologies. We can do it through therapy, but you got to make sure your therapist understands codependency and addiction, probably does what we call IFS through Richard Schwartz. He's got a great book called, it's in Internal Family Systems. It's called No Bad Parts. Codependent No More is the next thing I would have you read from Melody Beattie. And then I would say, take a look at some of the 12-step groups, like CODA, Codependence Anonymous, Al-Anon, Adult Children of Alcoholics, Nar-Anon. Those groups are designed for you to learn how to displace that energy and that anxious energy and that the codependency. There's just no other word for it. And how to deal with that. Because here's the thing, whether or not your person gets sober, stays sober, or changes their life, you can be okay. I'm not saying your life will be wonderful if they're using. I'm just saying you can get to a space where you have some neutrality and some sanity and not allow them to be running your life. There's the answer.
Well, it just reminds, like, what we always kind of talk about. The success rate shouldn't be hinged on the fact that if Johnny stays sober or not, or something like that. Because if Johnny doesn't stay sober, the family just dissolves and, we're doing the cycle all over again. So what you've always said, and which I completely agree, is, I mean, if everyone in the family does their own work, no matter if Johnny stays sober or not, he's coming back to a different family dynamic. And that in itself is success.
And what you just said is so critical, is that we have to prepare for the what if, Well, what if he doesn't stay sober? What if he leaves treatment? What if he doesn't like it? Okay, well, then you need to continue to stay, very clear and concise with your boundaries. And but how you do that is that requires you working on you. Everybody comes into the situation saying, we need to fix Johnny. And I'm like, well, Johnny's in treatment. Or Jane, whatever we're going to call them, they're in treatment. So there they go. Now you just said, the question was, how do I, now that they're in treatment, how do I displace my anxiety and my energy? That's how, because you don't need to live that way. And here's the fun part. I'm willing to bet that you're this way, not just in this one place. This is a lifestyle choice on your part.
Well, and all too often, I mean, it's kind of how families deal with certain things and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know if we talked on air or last week or something, but it was fascinating to me how I never really have taken time to even look at my family history or anything like that, or go deep. And when I started doing it, I realized like there's a lot of similar patterns on how our family has always dealt with, it doesn't have to be my addiction. It just could be in general. And it's kind of keep it in the closet. Let's not talk about it. Let's not ever bring it out like that. Let's keep that door locked. And it's almost like figure it out on your own. And so I think too many families have that belief, or however, I mean, maybe it's even passed down, however they deal with fill in the blank. It's kind of this family secret / family way of dealing with stuff.
Yeah. And here's the thing. It's not the family being purposefully, gathering up in the morning and saying, okay, we're not telling Kevin and Jay everything. We're only going to tell them this much, I mean, that happens. Don't get me wrong, and then eventually at some point somebody slips and is like, well, I'm like, wait, what? What? They went to prison? Wait, what?
Yeah.
So I think it's ingrained in the family system because there's a big shame piece, and they don't want to be seen as doing a bad job, or we were bad parents, or I was a bad husband or a bad wife or a bad child. And it's like, hey, look, it's okay. Nobody anticipates having to deal with severe mental health or addiction. They just don't, and when it shows up, I mean, it tends to be something that people don't have a lot of skill sets around. So that's why we exist, and that's why we have answers for it. So it's okay. That's one big thing, normalizing the family system and saying, hey, it's okay.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Don't freak out.
So touching on it, we kind of transitioning in, there's another question just about from a mom and dad, or was, talking about family history within mental illness, addiction. I mean, they say like they've been through a couple of treatments with their son. They always want to talk about, family history of alcoholism and mental illness and so forth. And she's curious. The question is, I think we maybe already touched on it, is how, from you on a personal standpoint, like how deep do you go into family history compared to kind of just, she talks about just in the moment and how you deal with in the moment. Like, well, how do you weigh family history compared to in the moment crisis?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Jay.
I didn't even ask.
I am. Whatever this is, I'm glad you asked. In my book, Chronic Hope: Families in Addiction, which is on Amazon, Audible, and Kindle for $9.99, I break it into 3 parts. And the first part is what we call triaging the crisis. It's the oh shit stage. What do we do? And so that really is what they're asking is, how do you sort of transition? And the initial stage is, oh my God, we need a plan. Let's put together a plan. Let's put the plan in place. Let's hold some boundaries. Let's get some stability into the family system that has not been there, or things are kind of going out of whack. So that's really the focus. All we're going to focus is on putting boundaries, holding boundaries, and making sure everybody's on the same team, same page. Once that's accomplished and the person is either addressing their addiction or has chosen to disengage from the family, which sucks, but sometimes that's what's necessary, then we can delve into the deeper family system issues and talk more about the genealogy and the history and oh yeah, by the way, there was Uncle so-and-so and Aunt so-and-so and Grandma this and Grandpa that. We can get there. Up front, we got to put together a plan. We got to put the fire out, and then we got to deal with that. Then we can dig into, God, hey, I wonder, have you guys dealt with this before? Is this like a familiar feeling or a familiar concept? And a lot of times families get used to being in crisis because that's just how they've always been. They've just constantly cycled in and out. And so, they don't know any different. And when things get stable, they get really unsure and uncomfortable and they freak out a little bit. So it's about learning how to deal with that and how to address that as a family and as individuals. One of the things I always tell families is you need to be prepared to do your own work. So that's the answer there.
Well, amazing segue. This third question for this week, and talks about family doing their own work. And she says, and I think we mentioned it, she's like, I think you guys said something about success rates go up if the family all do their own work.
Yep.
And so forth. And she really wants to know is, and I think we've had this question, but it's always good to have a refresher, is basically what she wants to know is, what is a family doing their own work looking like? What's success? What exactly, in most cases, she's like, I know everything's unique and so forth, but when you say everyone should do their own work, I think she's really asking is, what does that truly, what does it look like for a family to do their whole, their own work?
Sure. So what we start with is everybody sort of reading the same books, reading my book, reading Codependent No More, watching Pleasure Unwoven, learning about addiction. It's doing that initial stage of understanding what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then sort of the next layer in is digging in. And again, so there's this what we call psychoeducation. We got to do the education piece. But then you got to do your own therapy. Individual members of the family have to do their own individual therapy and family therapy, because that's how the family system heals, is by people coming in ready to play and ready to party, because they've done their own work and they've started realizing their, engagement, their responsibility, what's going on, their emotions, their feelings. That's critical. You can't just throw everybody in a room and expect it all to get sorted out magically. You got to come in with a little bit of your own engagement going on. And then we can put everybody in a room and everybody can talk about, what their feelings are, what it looks like, how they approach things. And then last but not least, it's the 12-step process. I firmly believe that families that engage in some level of 12-step process make a huge difference. Because the 12-step process is about accountability, and it's about spirituality and changing your life. And so imagine if you have someone who's in treatment for 30, 60, 90, 6 months or a year, and they're coming back to a family system where the people in the family system are doing the same work. They're doing the same 12-step work. They're going to therapy. They're educating themselves on addiction and codependency. Imagine how that's going to change the family dynamic, how to change the discussions, and how it's going to change how people treat each other. That's what we're looking for, is change on both sides. And that's how you do it. Education, therapy, 12 steps.
But be careful. They're going to find out pretty quick that it's just not Johnny isn't the straw that that stirs all the family's troubles and stuff. And so that's always the fascinating part, is when families are like, oh, you know what? We've been blaming Johnny for several years, turns out we've got a lot of other
Jimmy, Jane, Dad, Mom, they've all been participating in the process.
just adding to the garbage and so forth. But no, it's I like what you say there is if the family can start healing together, and again, success doesn't hinge on whether Johnny stays sober or not. But I mean, if they can communicate differently and just heal differently and internally, individually, and as a family, success rates skyrocket. I mean, there's no question about it. What do you think is the reluctance? I think the reluctance in general, like I think both of us faced it trying to get into recovery ourselves, but what would you think is the reluctance for families to get into those 12-step fellowship groups? Is it just because they just want to keep it to themselves and they think you're unique and they don't want to share their problems?
No, that's part of it. It's a little scary. It's uncomfortable. It's awkward. I mean, to be totally blunt, some Al-Anon meetings and CODA meetings and those meetings, they're not so awesome. I mean, God strike me down for saying stuff, speaking truth to the world. But, you and I both know there are some really not awesome AA meetings. As our friend Duke says, I went to a BB meeting. I'm like, what's that? He goes, I don't know, but it wasn't an AA meeting, And so you get the same thing in all the fellowships. So you got a family who maybe it's their first pass through treatment and having, dealing with their loved one. And they're told, you got to go to Al-Anon. And they walk into this Al-Anon room. And I'm like, I'm here because they told me to come here because my 25-year-old son's in treatment. And, they may get a warm reception. They may not. They may get information. They may not. They may sit in a large group. Then they may get into a meeting where someone's complaining and whining and telling stories about how awful everything is. These are all things, by the way, the families have said to me. I went, I hated it. I'm never going back. I'm like, great. I don't expect you to. No problem. Let's continue down the role of psychoeducation and therapy on this topic. I get a lot of families that are like, oh, we've been seeing the same therapist for 5 years. I'm like, are they educated in addiction and codependency? No. Okay. So it's maybe time for a different therapist, and that's okay. But, if I have cancer, I'm not going to go see the podiatrist. He went to med school, but that doesn't mean he knows what the hell I'm talking about. So that really has to be, and I think a lot of times, the families are just so scattered and so overwhelmed and so freaked out and so traumatized that they just are like, and to throw them into a room with a bunch of people that are speaking a weird language, and talking about stuff. And there's rules and regulations, and they're praying, and they're doing, and it's just like, and it's like, well, okay, I don't actually throw people into that mix. I'm like, let me educate the hell out of you. Let's talk. Let's do a lot of group work, and then you know what? I would really recommend giving it a try.
Yeah.
And walking in with some knowledge, not just walking in cold.
Yeah, that was early in my recovery, and I was going nuts I was just starting to sponsor, and just life was happening, and so my sponsor suggested I go to Al-Anon. So I went to an Al-Anon meeting here in beautiful Dallas, Texas, and I tell the story a lot. It was awful. I think I've only walked out of maybe 3 meetings in my recovery career. That was one. It was, and I told myself, no, Jay, stay. You see, you're just being closed-minded. You're judging. It was just a bad. I don't want to say it's a bad meeting, but I didn't get anything out of it. And I remember, it was about 6 months, 9 months later or something. I was at an AA convention, and they had AA speakers and Al-Anon speakers, and this guy named Tom W. came up, and it was an Al-Anon speaker, and his story and his little spiel blew my socks off. And I went up to him afterwards, and I said, I don't know where you live, but we Dallas doesn't do Al-Anon like you just did, because like that, I totally understood, but I went to one meeting and I'm just telling the story. He just starts laughing and he goes, so you went to one meeting, huh? And now you're saying Al-Anon in Dallas doesn't look, and I was like,
You're the expert.
all right. I see what you're saying. But at the same time, like, I mean, he's dead on. I mean, how quickly and I pulled the plug. I talked to him. I can stay in contact with him still to this day. But he put me in contact with some people in Dallas, males in Al-Anon and stuff. And we started going to these Al-Anon meetings, and like, holy crap. I mean, it's probably the same message at the both meetings. It's just I didn't hear it in one room and I heard it in another room, probably the same. But I mean, that's what I mean, you and I both know, like when I tell families, like, hey, if you don't like one, try another. But trying to get them to do a second one after a bad first one is much like me, you know? So we're stubborn.
So I don't, my position is before we throw them into one, you know, let's do a lot of education. Let's do a lot of self-awareness. And then wherever they are, I'm like, let me pick up the phone. Let me talk like you just did. You know, I'm like, oh, hey, I know a guy that lives in Chattanooga. Let me call him. Hey, is there any good Al-Anon? Who do I talk to? You know, and so, yeah.
Well, good. We got to start. I bring this up every year, it seems. I've been talking about it for 10 years, but finding a long list of great Al-Anon speakers. Because I still remember Tom W.'s Al-Anon speech that just hit my soul no matter what, you know, recovery, non-recovery, whatever, is just amazing. So I want to get a list of really good Al-Anon speakers and can send them to families maybe, and maybe they can relate to these speaker tapes. So
yeah, no, that's a great idea.
If you have any, just let me know. I'm going to put together this list. So
I got to tell you, the conferences that I go to, I always find out when the Al-Anon speakers are, and I go to those. I make sure I go to those because I got to tell you, those people, those stories, you're just like, ah, okay, got it.
I mean, I must have been 2 or 3 years sober, and so I mean, it's just blessings happen in my life. But I mean, that was one big blessing to just sit down. I remember saying, like, I don't even know why I'm here. Like, I'm listening to an Al-Anon speaker. He's just going to bitch, you know. And so this Tom guy literally blew my socks off talking about, you know, being an Al-Anon. And he doesn't even drink, and his wife, and, you know, married 3 alcoholics. And, you know, like, so it's just an incredible story. But you're right. Like, every conference I go to, like, you can bet your sweet tushy I'm sitting in on an Al-Anon speaker because they have a hell of a story. So
where's Tom live?
I want to say Maryland, or in the north, the Northeast. So successful guy too. So
yeah, I know a Tom in Denver and his wife Marilyn that are old school hardcore Al-Anoners, and they're you're just like what you're saying. They're just like, here's the deal, you know.
Yeah, this guy, I didn't even realize it, and so I started talking to him, and then lo and behold, like, I just, you know, he's incredible person. I mean, humble as can be, and it turns out like the guy's like got like 7 companies or something. You would never have known it. I mean, he's never even part of his story, but it's like I just love marrying alcoholics. I was like, hell yeah!
Awesome, bro. Awesome.
and then he found someone in recovery, and now his life, you know. So anyway, well, always a good time catching up. We got a couple. Keep the questions coming. Obviously, if you see a replay, you can type it in the comments, or you can reach out to us directly. But keep them coming. We love answering them. So, Kevin, you're off the clock, I guess.
Oh, thanks. I'll send you a bill.
I'm gonna go get a sandwich. So, you know, don't send me the bill right away, because I'll be away from my office trying to get a sub sandwich.
I recommend the blackened turkey Reuben.
You got me so hungry. I just can't tell you. Anyway, Kevin, always a pleasure.